I hate to be a naysayer, but I'm concerned about Freely. If you haven't watched Louis Rossmann's recent video or read about this carrier on the Privacy Guides forum yet, Freely is a new cell carrier in town that's making some pretty bold claims about privacy. You can sign up with nothing but a zip code, so no name, no social security number, no email, no credit check, etc. The founder is Nicholas Merrill, who is the guy who famously fought an FBI national security letter for a decade and became a bit of a legend in the privacy space as a result of that and his previous work with the Calyx Institute. Louis Rossmann is also an unpaid member of the board at Freely, and he is a relentless fighter for so many causes that I personally care very deeply about. But I don't like giving a lot of stock to the authority behind companies like this, however, and after digging through Freely's white papers and other resources, I have some serious concerns that Freely is setting its users up to have a very false sense of security and can't actually deliver on the claims that their marketing materials are making. Freely's secret sauce is a system they call double-blind armadillo, and the general idea behind it is to use zero-knowledge proofs to separate your identity from your network activity. In theory, this makes it so that Freely doesn't know what SIM card belongs to which customer record. The problem is that Freely is a mobile virtual network operator, or MVNO. They don't own the cell towers. From what I can tell, they're using T-Mobile's. Of course, I wouldn't expect any new carrier like this to build out their own infrastructure across the United States. That's a bit ridiculous. But this setup does give T-Mobile access to extremely sensitive and personally identifying information that Freely's double-blind armadillo system does really nothing to protect. Namely, the two biggest points of information are going to be your phone's IMEI number and your SIM card's IMSI number. So for example, if you take a Freely SIM card and you pop it into an iPhone that you've been using on another T-Mobile carrier for years, you haven't really gained anything at all. You've only given T-Mobile a new data point to work with that's tied to the IMEI on your existing phone. Even if you want to use Freely and you go buy a brand new device to use with it, these identifiers on these phones being static are a huge problem because the underlying carrier, T-Mobile, can use cell tower triangulation to track your IMEI number with extremely high precision, and they can tell a ton about you based on that data. For example, if you're spending 8 hours a day in one building and 8 hours a night in another, it's not really that hard for T-Mobile to suss out where you work and where you live. Additionally, there are plenty of services that are provided by data brokers where a company like T-Mobile could take all of the location data that they're gathering and cross-reference it with these massive databases of personal information that data brokers collect. You should watch Privacy Guides' video about data brokers after this one if you're in the US, by the way. It's kind of crazy stuff that you should opt out of as much as possible. It is just so trivial for companies and even law enforcement to get your personal information from data brokers like that based on things like your location history that many times they don't even bother with writing up a warrant or looking up your billing information with your actual carrier in the first place, which is really the only information that Freely is actually protecting here. There are alternatives that purport to solve this IMEI and IMSI problem, but to my knowledge, none of them are commercially available yet. Cape is a new carrier, for example, that has a product they call Obscura, which is a special phone that rotates your IMEI, in addition to the standard IMSI number rotation that the Cape cell network does. However, as far as I can tell, Cape doesn't actually sell this phone to the public yet, and the standard Cape offering with a standard phone like an iPhone you can get at any store simply doesn't provide enough privacy protections because your IMEI number, again, would not be changing, which would put a carrier like Cape into a similar position as Freely here, so that's not really something I could recommend. I haven't had a chance to use anything from Cape personally. I just wanted to point out their Obscura phone seems interesting to me, but I would say that their standard service is not worth the expense, much like Freely, and probably would be avoided in my mind in kind of the same way. Going back to Freely, your phone number with Freely is going to be static as well, and that's why phone numbers are very commonly used by data brokers as the primary key that ties everything together, because once you use that phone number with your bank or with Amazon or with some other website that sells or leaks your information to data brokers, any protections that you might have gained from Freely are going to be pretty much wiped out at that point. They're going to be able to tie that number to your address and all of this other information that's being collected by all these companies. And let's talk about the data that Freely does collect for a second. They say that they need your zip code, but what they really need is your zip +4 number. In many areas, especially dense cities, that +4 code can narrow down your location to a specific block or even a specific apartment building all on its own. Plus, if you use a traditional payment method like a credit card, Freely's underlying payment providers, who are Stripe and Now Payments at the moment, they're going to collect a ton of information about you during the checkup process. The typical stuff like your IP address and other information from your browser for anti-fraud protections, for example. Freely's privacy policy is, at the very least, pretty clear about this, stating many times that much of the data collected by Freely is either not sent to Freely themselves, or they regularly delete that data, which they do receive. But at the end of the day, the privacy policies of these other companies that Freely is dealing with hasn't changed at all, and the data that they are collecting is immense and not really protected by Freely. Getting into Freely's white paper, I was also a bit disappointed to discover that their proposed solution they developed has not even been fully implemented at Freely in the real world. The solution that they describe is a double-blind system that protects data between the users and the mixing service, which is Freely in this case, and between the mixing service and the underlying carrier, who's T-Mobile. At the end of the paper, though, they reveal that the current implementation at Freely is not this full double-blind system that they just spent the whole paper describing at all. And in fact, currently it only protects the information between Freely and the user, but doesn't really involve the telecom operator at this time. To be honest with you all, I'm pretty unconvinced that the full system as described in the white paper would even achieve the privacy protections from cell towers that people would expect from a privacy-focused carrier, even if they did use the full system. But it's still very disappointing to me to see that the double-blind aspect of the system that they call out so frequently in their marketing materials isn't even double-blind at all. At the end of the day, the only thing that Freely is really doing well is lowering the bar to obtain a phone number in the first place. This is a legitimate problem, and it's commendable to have even more options to obtain a phone number without providing a ton of information, given how many services need a phone number to even register with them these days. But you all need to remember that just because you aren't providing this information during sign-up doesn't mean that the companies behind Freely can't gather this information really easily behind the scenes. Freely doesn't make this clear in their marketing at all, and I think it's very dangerous for them to obscure this fact with bold statements in their marketing like no tracking and no surveillance. Another problem with Freely is simply that this isn't a unique product offering. If you want this burner phone type experience, you can already go to Best Buy, for example, pay cash for a Mint Mobile SIM, and activate it on public Wi-Fi somewhere. That's going to give you the same, if not better, anonymity from your cell provider without the double-blind marketing fluff that Freely is charging for at a significantly more expensive rate than other MVNOs. There are also other MVNOs like SilentLink, for example, which accept private cryptocurrencies like Monero, just like Freely does, and are going to provide an eSIM to you, again, at pretty much a fraction of the cost. Again, I have to stress that I haven't used any of these other carriers personally, so they're not recommendations, but if you're currently looking into Freely right now, I do think that these other options are really worth exploring for you. If Freely had simply come out and stated that increasing the ease of obtaining phone numbers without personal information was their goal, I might have commended them for being another competitor in the space that I've just described here. As it stands though, the misleading claims that Freely is making in their marketing read as flat out dangerous to me, and I couldn't in good conscience really recommend a service that has marketing like this, even if I can think of a few legitimate use cases for the service that they're offering here. Don't let their double-blind armadillo marketing distract you from the basics when it comes to telecom privacy. Your privacy is only going to be as strong as your weakest link, and in this case, that link is going to be the physical hardware in your pocket and the T-Mobile towers that it talks to. I do think Louis Rossmann's heart is in the right place here, and privacy in the cell network space is something that really does need to be overhauled and taken a closer look at. There are some novel advancements that are being made here between zero-knowledge IMSI rotations from other carriers already, and some newer phone hardware with rotating IMEI numbers that might be released in the future. Unfortunately, I don't think the chosen solution to partner with Merrill on Freely is the right one for the problem at hand here. If you're a Freely user, let me know in the comments what your experience with it is, and if you're in the US, please watch Privacy Guides' latest video interview about a slate of bills being pushed through Congress. It's scary stuff. I'll catch you all later.